session of the day. This is on foster families, and I'm pleased to introduce Seattle Humane Society CEO, David Loewe.
So, I'm the one standing between you and a drink ticket and appetizers. Every afternoon, everybody either drew, flew, used a wheelbarrow, did something to get here, and so this is a tough one. So we'll try to go through, and I think this conversation also lends itself to some Q&A. There's just some intricacies that foster, depending on what your situation is, what your organization looks like. Might be good to talk about per se. There's a little bit of background. I spent most of my career in a nuclear power plant, and after about 16 years, I was recruited to set up a high-speed rail line between Canada and Southern Oregon. So did that for a while, and so fission, railroads really had nothing to do with animal welfare. A friend and I set up a small company that we sold to Nextel about the same time that Sprint was merging and taking over. And so I found myself a young guy that didn't have to work. So I started volunteering at Seattle Humane. I came into this place completely backdoor, meaning that we adopted a cat there because we went to the pound, wanted to go and see some kitties. We adopted a cat there. We started becoming donors. I started to become a volunteer, never intending for myself to become a staff member. It was just sort of a fun thing that I did. And along the way, a gentleman had passed away there. And it's just literally, he took a nap and didn't wake up. So I guess if you gotta go good. And so I told the CEO at the time that I'd be glad to help you for a little bit, but just in a volunteer capacity. So I was the interim volunteer acting director of the facility for a while. It was kind of long. I did that for about 3 or 4 months. And in that time, we pretty much overhauled the entire way that the animals flow through our little tiny old cramped shelter. And so that turned into becoming the director of operations and the chief operations officer within about 2 months after that. So I went from no animal experience, all of a sudden running a shelter. And I had a pretty simple agreement with our CEO. You market the place, you raise money, everything outside the fence is yours. I don't want to know about it. Everything inside the fence is mine, leave me alone. Pretty bold statement, could have got fired. Guess what? I would have gone right back to being the same thing I was doing before as a volunteer. So it worked out actually very well. And one of the things that really struck me as a volunteer was you wear the red shirt. Everyone wears a red shirt, volunteer. And somehow you're invisible as soon as you become a volunteer. You can walk around, you can hear conversations, you walk in and out of meetings, and people, they just don't realize that you're there. And the stuff you would hear, oh, we can only do this. Oh no, those people being the ones in the red shirts, they can't do it. It'd just be impossible. So that's sort of my take and background, and one of the reasons when I talked to Bonnie about doing this, if you want to talk about our shelter today, the team, some of our staff managers and directors are taking care of it, it's a whole different kind of program and twist on what I consider a fairly high-functioning group. I wanted to share some of the nuts and bolts and the good and bad about going from almost no foster parents to a lot of foster parents. And that being really one piece of a bigger puzzle we'll talk about. First, I think Bonnie used this picture. There's a little bit of background about Juno. Juno was a foster. Came in almost bald. He had some skin issues. Went out to a foster for a while. Everybody knew the joke about Juno except for me. So, hey, let's do a little PR picture with Juno. Well, it turned out Juno, in his prior life, probably seen those things on TV where they have the tractor poles with this big sled that moves behind. Well, they had the same kind of thing for dogs. Juno was 150 pounds of pure muscle. So they brought a photographer in. They knew what was going to happen. I'm innocent. I have no idea. They brought the photographer the digital camera that made it like a machine gun noise because it was clicking so fast. And so there's 499 pictures of me being drugged around the floor, literally by Juno, and the one good one of all of a sudden he just decided to pose. So that was the a success story of Juno. We got to meet him a couple other times with the family that adopted him. Actually knew about this sled and karting. They'd had some other dogs, Bernese mountain dogs that they'd used in the past. So it made a perfect fit, and they had to actually get a bigger SUV for him. Pretty good size. I wish everything was this easy, and foster including. This is something I clipped off the internet years ago. You can tell from the fancy blackout from the school. But it's a bit of an eye test. This fundraiser in Loewe is sending students home with the task of selling door-to-door, collecting money, and delivering goods. Please help us to avoid that by supporting our PTA with your donation and helping us achieve our goals to support our students and faculty. And there's some choices. I don't want to bake, so here's money I would have spent on those cupcakes. I don't want to hit up friends, family, and coworkers, so here's the money I would have spent buying wrapping paper. This goes all the way down to even at the $100 level. I really wouldn't help anyway, so here's $100, forget my name. And the fill in the blank is the best one. I'm making this donation to express my appreciation for having nothing to buy, sell, or do except fill out this form. Now, wouldn't this be easy if we just sort of snap our fingers, and even if there's sort of a sarcastic or humorous twist on it, that we could go from a very small program to very big just by fill in the blank, send in a couple dollars, and this is all going to work out magically. Foster families are a safety net. You can almost think of it as sort of one finger on your hand. There's foster, but it has to work with the intake department, the veterinary department, your animal care department, your adoption teams, and depending on your setup, there may be another finger somewhere that needs to be part of that hand. But it's another virtual warehouse, but it can't be a warehouse. It can't be a sanctuary. And everyone's got to be on board. For a while, it was David and one of my partners there, Katie. It was David and Katie's foster program. So it's crazy things that they want to do. And it was always referred to in the they and the them about those families that are doing damage to our animals. Because obviously a foster family couldn't do any of the good care that we as staff can. It's an interesting predicament to find yourself in, thinking this is just the best thing ever. Other shelters are doing it, other groups are doing it. You don't hear about the horror stories. And yet, if it's a change, some people are very resistant to that. We had to make a decision about a couple of key leaders that were adamant about not wanting to do this. And so we, what's the politically correct term, made them available for other work opportunities because they clearly were not on board. The foster program itself, it's not free. You're still your animals. So if you've got a tight budget and you're barely able to feed the pets within your care, within the shelter, be very careful about starting to then add into the foster because they're part of your population. They're part of, you may get a little help with some supplies that the foster parents, near and dear will want to help with. But when it comes to medicine, it's your pet. When it comes to the microchip, it's your pet. When it comes to the food, special diets, other specialty medication, it's your pet, so it's part of your inventory. And of course, you will always have some folks that want to help because they looked up Dr. Google. So you got to make sure you get a very clear path with each and every animal. As Dr. Google said, you better be prepared for all of the input that someone has filtered through about what Dr. Google, DVM, has let them know. This probably dates me. Everybody remembers Lucille Ball, and probably this skit is probably one of the most famous, right there with Abbott Costello and a couple of the Jackie Gleasons with the chocolates on the conveyor belt. And I show this, and I won't show the full video clip, but everyone remembers a couple chocolates coming through, and a few more. They're trying to wrap them and trying to sort them, and pretty soon they're putting them in their mouth and in their apron and under their hat, and until it's just out of control. And then someone comes by and says, "Looks like everything's good, doing good. Turn it up faster." And now they're coming off the end of the conveyor belt, and it's just chaos. Foster is a lot like this. Foster is a way to help you more animals through the system to get pets out of your shelter that really don't belong there. And I have a controversial opinion that animals don't belong in any shelter. I don't care how good it is, how new it is. We are a temporary, some would even consider a jail. We are a temporary waypoint, hopefully very temporary, very short, but we're just a stop in an otherwise happy animal journey. They came from a bed, they came from a couch, somewhere along the way they lost that opportunity. Now they're in our shelter. We need to make it as comfortable as possible, and foster is a wonderful way to do that. About us. All staff foster volunteers. Only the medical team, a couple vets, a couple technicians, one of the managers, and one supervisor that was over in the admissions side who used to be a veterinary technician. They were the gold standard. No one else could touch an animal. How dare you think of sending a pet overnight to someone else without our training, without our credentials? And of course, the excuses. I mean, I listed 4 up here. No one else knows enough. They'll stop supporting. The community's going to just hate us for doing this. It's careless. It's reckless. A volunteer could never do what we do. Just, and the list goes on. I could go for another hour about some of the stories we heard. And they're just urban myths. It was their way of making sure that things hadn't changed. And prior to 2005, our stats were pretty simple. And I've looked back at some of the records. I've been with the agency for just about 11 years now. Prior to that, it looked like most patient monitors where the patients died just sort of flatlined. We have 20 years where our agency didn't do anything. We took in the same amount of animals. We kept it between a 75 or 76% save rate. The same number of staff were there. The budget didn't really change except for inflation. What happened? I mean, I've never seen an organization of any size or type just stagnant and doing the same thing, a black clipboard at the end of the week to see who wasn't going to make it. And it was really kind of sad. A couple of board members got together. They let the prior CEO go. A lot of argument. They made a big deal about it. Took a lot of volunteers. Took a lot of donors with them. It was sort of time to rebuild. So what we did in the course of, during these 4 years we talked about adding the extra foster families, we went from 75% to 89% in our save rate. And currently we continue to add. Right now, for about the last 5 years, we've been bouncing this 98.7, 98.8. Just can't, I'll round up to 99, but we're right there. And we're still open to mission. We do take appointments for owner surrenders just so we can learn a little bit more about them, but we still are an open shelter. And so without fosters, without the medical team, without the adoption team, it was a big team effort. We had to decide what we wanted to do. We knew that our old shelter was just small. It was tiny, it was cramped. There were cages everywhere. Some of the pictures that we saw in the different presentations with the cages that were small, crammed in next to dogs. They were next to our washing machines. They were next to the dog grooming dryers. It was just like the worst possible situation for dogs and cats. And they were just stacked everywhere. We also knew that we had a public shelter run by the county that on any given day they had to investigate themselves at one point in time for cruelty. That's an interesting conflict of interest. They were going to go bankrupt. The county executive at the time wanted to shut them down just because of the horrible PR that was coming out. And then we had a dam that started, there was an earthen dam that was built way back when, and they thought it was going to crack. It started to leak, and they were sure it was going to flood. And the two places it was going to flood, actually 3, one was the South Center Mall in Tukwila, South Seattle, the jail, which was down, which that's kind of great to think about, and the King County's Animal Control Group. So at any one time, we were just sure we were going to get this huge influx, and the shelter just was not going to be able to do it. So we had plans to convert an auditorium into temporary kennelling. It was a tough time, and knowing that we could also use the community to help us with what was probably going to be doubling our intake with just a snap of the fingers. But we wanted to make sure we were very transparent about what we were doing. I've heard groups talk about, oh, we don't let people within a certain area, or we only let volunteers do certain jobs. I was encouraged by one of the presenters talking about their volunteers get to do everything except operate. We have volunteer vets that will come in. And I used to say the exact same thing, and then the DVM started to show up as well. But the piece of having your team, your staff team, your volunteer team, having everyone on board that this is a critical piece of your operation, that it is the right thing to do. Without everyone working together, it's not going to work. Everyone has an opinion. Some good, some bad. I see some smiles in the room, so I know that many of you have had opinions voiced by folks. You have to think about what you want, what your agency needs, and stay the course. What we needed was dogs that were getting stressed in the kennel, very old kennel, a lot of block wall, a lot of chain link fence, poor acoustics, a lot of fence fighting, just everything you can think of what a shelter looked like in 1965. That's what we were living with. We also knew that kittens, we wanted to start working not only with those that were not yet of age for surgery, but also for third trimester moms and let them come to term. Controversial at the time, very well accepted now. And so that's what we wanted to focus on. And then, of course, the senior kitties that during kitten season, they sort of get overlooked. By the fall, you come back and realize, oh gosh, you need those 12, 14-year-olds. So that's when you do your promos. So the kittens get out of everyone's sort of gotta have one mode through the summer. But we made sure that we really advertised what we're doing. This was a new thing. It was a new thing for us. But we want to make sure that our donors, our volunteers, our board of directors, everybody knew what we were wanting to do. And we wanted to start with some successes. We did not want to immediately put a brand new foster family with a medical case that had an outcome of hope they make it. We put animals in that we were pretty sure were going to be very good success stories that we could then adopt out quickly afterwards and then share the success with everybody. Look at Fluffy. Fluffy went through the program. Fluffy came as a hard luck case. Mr. and Mrs. X helped us in their home for the last 2 weeks. Fluffy's back, and now Fluffy has a new home, and then shared the post-adoption pictures and stories with everybody. So, wow, it works. And so you want that working machine going before you start to expand and add some of those other little more delicate situations that fosters are really, really helpful for, but you have to be prepared for. It's not free. As I said, they're still your pet, and there's still some touch points that we'll talk about. And I've got kind of a best guess number based on where we were at for staffing that I'll share with you in a minute. But they're not sanctuaries. You need to think about a foster as you've got a contract, just like when you move a pet from your intake to maybe a holding to adoption, they should be there for about X number of days. You need to have a contract with your foster family that you're going to bring the Fluffy, Rover, Rex, whatever it may be. You're leaving at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 1st. We need to see him back. We'll put you as an appointment 2 weeks from now. Tuesday the 15th, 2 p.m. We'll see you then. So they also know, okay, this is not a forever thing. I don't have to worry about falling in love. It's not my responsibility to adopt my brother, sister, next door neighbor. It's a temporary stay. And most foster families, the reason they're fosters, either one, they want to help. They may travel. They've got work schedules that having a pet of their own just can't do it. Or the college kids. I'm off during the summertime. I've got 3 months free. High school kids. So they've got the time and flexibility, and it's sort of break and schedule dependent, but having a pet full-time in their life just isn't right. So knowing that they can come in and make a short-term commitment and then turn out how it would be a happy story. Now you've got a foster family. It's not just a foster. Now you've got the family involved. Bringing them back in, it's just like having another shelter that's virtual. So thinking about your intake department and your veterinary department. You're bringing pets back in. If you've got really tight space in the holding area, you got to work side to side with your intake department because they may be thinking, I'm going to bring in a transfer. I've got a setup with an owner surrender who's got 4 dogs and 2 cats. We've been trying to get them in, and all of a sudden, that, in their mind, holding is full. The foster team comes in and says, hey, I see six holes, 6 cages. Well, I'm going to bring some fosters back in. They've got to work very tightly together. And that goes the same with the medical team. How many spay-neuters, how many surgeries, how much is on the schedule, how much capacity you have, you've got to be coordinating with them as well. And again, that harmony, we struggled for a long time. It was the story I kept telling was we only have one checkbook. And I know I gave blank checks to everybody, but you've got to talk amongst each other because the checkbook only has so much money in it. That visual, husband and wife got a checkbook and share. They usually do a pretty good job communicating, but somehow cage space and intake team and foster, that didn't work so well, and sometimes not with the medical because it was David and Katie's program that they were trying to do. Then as the ownership started to take place, the communication started, and it just became a new habit. Metrics. I'm a data geek, I own it, but I wanted to know what this did to really help the pets. And there's a variety of different metrics that we all use, we all talk about. Length of stay, time to spay neuter, we use time in foster, steps of progression until from spay neuter to behavior, or depending if you do your behavior before your spay neuter, surgery waits, dental waits, the different barriers for a pet from the time they come into the shelter until they go home with a family. We wanted to make sure we understood what we were doing pre-foster or high volume foster, and as the foster expanded, were we actually helping? Just building a big machine doesn't do anything if your length of stay isn't going down, if your adoption rates aren't going up, if your save rate's not going up. Otherwise, you're just creating a program and just kind of spinning wheels like the gerbil and the little hamster wheel. We took advantage of multiple things to grow, because you don't just snap your fingers and one day have 10 and the next day have 800. The county shelter's dilemma. We might close because we're going to be investigated, we're going to go bankrupt. We let them deal with their issues. We were just there to help. And so we made sure and advertised uncertain future down south. If you want to come up for volunteer orientation, learn about becoming a foster, there is a way you can help. There is a way you can help. And it doesn't have to be adopting. Just come in, become a volunteer, become a foster volunteer. We started originally holding them in a small classroom that held about 20 people. That didn't work. So we started actually holding them out in an auditorium, a rubber floor in it. It was basically just a warehouse. And we had to start capping it at 100 because we didn't have enough parking for people. And so we started just rolling these volunteer orientations, one after another after another. And it was interesting, volunteers, about 2/3 of the people, they would sign up for a shift completely unrelated to foster. What we really wanted was foster parents. So it was sort of unrelated to foster, but we would talk about the foster program. And so as we started to really ramp up the volunteer program that way, what we found is there's kind of like 3 gyms, a three-legged stool. Have the new volunteer workmanship, something that you're embedded in the daily operation. It could be animal care, dog walking, adoption support, whatever program might be. Be a foster parent, something you can do at your home or spare time, and become an event volunteer, someone who helps you at your big galas, your fundraisers, your street fairs, wherever they may be. But we've also found these are people who, when you're just a foster parent, these are people you don't see very often. But you've got to say thank you. They're a remote workforce that are giving tens of thousands of hours of their time. And you've got to say thank you. Do crazy things. Don't buy people gifts. Don't spend your money that way. I'll frown at that. Have a potluck. Have a thank you picnic. Have an appreciation day. We do service anniversary awards. We do it on the 5-year mark. We're giving away little pins to denote that. They're not very expensive, but I mean, I'm proud when we're standing up there. We're giving away pins in 20 or 25, 30. I gave away a 35-year pin last year. These are people that are invested and have been long before I was ever on the picture, and they've seen us at our worst and at our best, and they're still here and they're still helping. You move an animal in your shelter, went from dorm 1, cubby such and such, you've got an identifier, you know where the pet is. Fosters are the same way. Very easy, and we found the hard way, it can be very sloppy. If the foster team is just pulling pets out, oh, I'm going to send this off to foster, I'll catch the paperwork up later. Well, someone wanted to adopt the pet, someone wanted to see, the medical team thought they needed to do rounds, all of a sudden there's just an empty kennel, an empty cubby. So keeping your database accurate and in real time, or as fast as real time as your system allows, very crucial. As I said, celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. This little guy came in. This is one of the moms that gave birth. And he and his 5 other siblings, we celebrated the success. They were had no harm to others other than they happened to be in a home with a pregnant mom in an area in a shelter that would have otherwise euthanized them. So we gave mom about a week at home. She gave birth. Of course, we took a few pictures, told the story, and adopted everybody out. It's taken us about 1/2 of a person for every 100 foster parents that we've added. And that stayed fairly true all the way through, which makes for some interesting sort of structure changes. When it was small, we had a couple quarter time of some people, dog and cat, species specific. As it grew a little bit more, then we had a half-time cat foster, and still about a quarter time dog. Then we started shuffling. Behavior primarily was a dog program. Medical, URI, surgery recovery was more for the cats. So we shuffled the reporting structure. Feline, the coordinator for foster, reported to the vet clinic. We let the director of behavior oversee the dog foster coordinator. We've morphed that thing 6 or 7 more times. And we finally got individuals that could work together. Then we had 7-day coverage. And so right now we're up to, we have a full-time manager, 3 full-time coordinators, 2 half-time, kind of take the load off on the weekends. And we're right now at about 840 foster families. And that goes along with 3,500 volunteers. They're a piece of that, 3,500 volunteers. And we're, this last year, we try not to count the foster hours on team that way. A little over 200,000 hours of on-hand volunteer service at the shelter. And if you add the foster hours, it's another 6-figure number to throw in there. They're very, very, very good. Logistically, though, one of the things we found is intake, adoption. Everyone's sort of got their supply and sort of meant to go through the shelter. I need to send a cat out. I need a cat crate, a little more durable than the cardboard one you might send with an adopter. I need a little bit of litter. That's over in the animal care side. I need some food. Well, that's upstairs in the feeding area. And so you'd see people, I got to get a supply. That's all they were doing. And I think part of our early staffing was just let people run around the shelter picking up stuff. So we learned, we started co-locating the supplies that the foster team needs much closer to the rest of the group. Advice. Everybody wants to sprint before you walk. Pick some of these and add slowly. Get good at it, and then add another. URI, kennel cough for dogs, surgery recovery, third trimester moms, bottle babies. If you have a bottle baby foster family, they are your golden unicorn. This is probably the hardest foster because they don't sleep. They don't sleep ever. They're feeding every 2 hours. I've tried it. My wife and I have fostered about 450 cats. We've failed adoption-wise about 5 or 6 times now. We bring back, fortunately, we're not a hoarder. You haven't seen us on television that way. But we are also the old kitty, the lethargic, the blood work says you shouldn't be alive. And I have a competition with another volunteer and adopter who can adopt the oldest pet ever. And we've continued to, we were held first place for a long time with a 15-year-old kitty. Was going to be a hospice kitty. Only got a couple months left. Full of cancer, isn't going to make it. 8 years later, she didn't make it at 23. My counterpart adopted a 17-year-old, so we did a 19-year-old. She found a 21-year-old to adopt. I did a 22-year-old. And then she, I don't think, well, I can't beat this one, but she actually has a verified 25-year-old that she just adopted. And the only reason I know it's verified is that actually the kitten came from Seattle, Humane. We still have the records. So it's amazing what these pets can do. And generally, these little petite female cats, they can just go forever. They're like an Energizer bunny. Ringworm. You might as well plan for it as your program grows, depending on where you're at. You can transfer. You may not have ringworm in the area, but you're very likely to have a foster family. A little funny spot. It's growing up around the. Well, guess what? You got ringworm, and it's not the disaster and the horror story that everyone wants to make of it. It's actually treatable. If you will talk to the family, it stinks a little bit. It's kind of messy, but they can actually treat that home much better than you can probably treat it at the shelter. Bite quarantine, contact public health in your area. They allow us to do bite quarantines in a foster home if the bite happened in the foster home. So we can't send them off campus if it happened at the shelter. But this is just to make sure that no rabies, and knock on wood that we stay at this very low canine, feline to human rabies. Behavior modification. We have about 35 families that work nothing but the BMOD program. And so the euthanasias of the past of resource guarding, dog-to-dog interaction, all the things that, it's unadoptable. The foster families do this. And these are near and dear folks, and we say thank you a lot because some of these dogs might be with them for 3 or 4 months. It can take some long time. And they'll bring them back and they're ready for another one and another one. They've been doing this for years and years and years. And then hospice, which I'll talk about in just a second. Here's another guy that came in almost completely bald. Went off to foster, they brought back the dog, and this is the same one. So, pretty cute. Hospice. It sounds like a great idea, foster and hospice, and what we found is we were always wrong. Oh, this cat has got some pretty bad medical situations, probably isn't going to make it 6-9 months, and sure enough, either the next day, the animal's failing, or in my case, where we actually just went ahead with the adoption, 8 years later, the cat was still going well. So what we found is if the animal is healthy enough, it can actually go to a foster, even under the guise of hospice. Let's put them up with adoptions. We have an amazing community, fortunately. And you tell the story, you don't hide anything. If it's severe enough, we may have them sign a waiver to let they acknowledge everything that we told them about this pet. But there's something about the attitudes of a lot of the adopted families. I want the hardest. I want the oldest. I want the one with the most arthritis. And it makes them feel good. And that's a story that they tell all their friends and family. That's the story that they tell on their Facebook page. They got the toughest case. They got the worst one. They saved a life. The shelters probably saved a life, but their story they tell, they saved life. They turned it back into a first person, and that's a big win-win. Foster coordinators with no medical coverage. We had some really nice people try. They really, really, really tried. But combination of Dr. Google and, of course, sending animals out that have a medical related, could be surgery recovery, a suture came out, animals vomiting at 2 a.m. Just, it really put folks in a stressful situation. And just, it was almost overwhelming daily. You can just see the stress build on these folks. So we reshaped the group that is responsible to make sure they've either been a vet assistant, been a vet tech, they've taken a rotation through the vet clinic, and can at least speak the jargon where they're comfortable with a lot of medical cases. Same thing with the phone coverage. Animals are out of your shelter, but they're still out in the community, they're still yours, and the foster parent is looking to you. You're my lifeline. I need to know who to call. And so we did the phone tree. The problem was the phone tree had about 1 or 2 branches, and then it stopped. So it was like people were like, okay, hubby, can you hold the phone? I'm going to run and get a shower real quick. And I think they took this on themselves to where appreciate the ownership, but you can tell also that stress was really building on them. Your vets are away. At the end of the day, close at 6, at 6:01 is the problem. You close at 8, it's 8:01 is the problem. Someone's going to have a medical situation. It's expensive to use off-site vet clinic compared to having staff vets, having the medications, having the infrastructure there during the day. Also, it's nighttime and you need to go somewhere. And they would be glad to help you with sustainable care for the next 12 or so hours, and it'd be about $1,500, please, thank you. And we did that a couple of times and realized, okay, we are going to quickly empty the coffers if we keep this up. So we picked a couple of strategically located vet clinics and worked out some overnight agreements with them that they could help us, we could help them. The help they needed was, what do you do when the dog or cat gets sort of dumped at the doorstep? So we will take that pet from them. They don't really have a place for it. Vets are kind-hearted people. Their staff are kind-hearted, but they're also not an adoption agency. We have enough animals going through their shelter anyway. So you cut us a much better deal than the 5 or 10% professional discount, we'll take your pet. And that saved us a lot of time and money. By going there over and over again, a lot of the folks, and 3 of the 4 we originally started with, actually just turned it into a donation. They trusted what we were doing. A couple things to think about in the foster world. Check with your insurance carrier. It's your pet. It's out in their home. What happens when Fido hops the fence, scares the little lady, she falls down, her tooth falls out, she magically loses her diamond ring, and she wants to sue you because her daughter used to work in a law firm. Hypothetical situation or something that happened to us 4 years ago. We'll let you choose. But you want to make sure your insurance carrier is on board and understanding what foster is and your responsibility to the pet and to the family that has it. L&I, depending on the jurisdiction and state, some places require you to pay this, some don't. The cost of a foster hour compared to a staff hour, it's very, very slim. Even for the amount of hours and families that we have, it's like maybe $1,400 a year. It's actually very, very cheap. But what that allows us is, cat bit my finger. Go to the clinic, tell them it's an L&I claim, see how they made, here's our number. And it really sort of takes an extra burden off the family. Of course, making sure that the off-hour emergencies are handled, or there is some mechanism between the phone, the clinic, everybody knows, and throw in your manual or your handout, so there's a real transparent path for help. And whatever shelter software, you might be on Chameleon, Pet Point, Shelter Buddy, Shelter Love, there's a whole bunch of them. But you've got the ability to track in real time all of the different situations and where the pets are. Q&A. I'll answer questions for a little bit, and I'm going to leave with a thought about animal welfare.
Congratulations on doing a beautiful job. How many animals are you putting in these 800 homes annually?
Last year we put in 4,500 pets went through foster.
Wow. You talked about appreciation events for fosters, and you talked about pins for fosters, and you talked about social media recognition for fosters. Where would you start if you were somebody who is looking to build an appreciation program, and we probably won't be launching all three all at once?
I would probably do somewhat of the face-to-face gathering, a picnic at a public park. We've done those fairly frequently. A place that you can bring your dogs, bring your family. The family's invited. You know, your cost is like $100 for a park rental fee, some hamburgers, barbecue, a little bit of get-together time. But the appreciation of being able to, a lot of the foster parents, they don't know each other either. They're not only away from the shelter, they're away from each other. But they get to come together and you start sharing the story, especially some of the tougher to place. I had Rex for 2 weeks. Really, I had Rex too. I was the one that showed Rex the adopted family, and it was my good foster who was the one that got him adopted. So bring them together.
Okay.
And it's an easy way to say thank you, and it's a lot of fun too.
Thanks.
Do you allow for a private Facebook page for your fosters?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do they allow private foster Facebook pages so the fosters can communicate with each other?
We have a separate volunteer foster or a volunteer page that does allow that to happen. And actually, we have two. One is for more of the volunteer manager to distribute out, and the other is actually run by a volunteer. And we've encouraged. Sometimes that one turns into a little bit of a gripe fest. So we don't monitor it. We're not going to police it. But sometimes the intent of being able to share information, and I don't like that either. Pretty soon there's pages, but what we found is it also gets self-policed by a couple of our more vocal volunteers. One of them, my favorite quote was, "Shut up, Sally." And you can imagine Sally had a few things to say.
One other question, I'm sorry. Do you know how much it costs to manage a cat foster program monthly, dog foster program monthly? Do you have a budget for each of those as well?
We do. It's underneath the animal care group. And right now, I have it on an annual. I'm thinking about our spreadsheets. We just approved our budget. But with the supplies, the medical, the off-site emergency care, and the staff, it's about $450,000 annual. And we're a $9.5 million annual budget facility.
Your annual intake?
Right about 7,500 now. And we just finished. We just transitioned. For those of you know, we just finished a $30 million capital campaign. Last August, we opened up our new shelter, so we were able to scrap the old one, build in place and on top of. It was a miserable couple of years, but we opened up the new shelter in August. The parking lot was finished in December, and we're still kind of making things work. Our goal is to hit 10,000 annually. That's what we go for, purpose for.
I understand that you're talking about the foster program for a shelter, which is different than a foster program for a volunteer foster-only rescue. And I'm going to definitely find you later on because I have several questions. But one of the first questions that I come up with is, you mentioned that your shelter keeps the animal in foster care for a minimum of 2 weeks.
Depends on the situation.
Okay.
2 weeks is kind of an average.
Okay, average. What's the maximum other than for behavior? I understand behavior issues, can be up to 6 months depending on the issue. But
The next more common for some surgeries, 3 or 4 weeks. Babies, or the third trimester moms, tend to be about a 10-weeker, a couple weeks to give birth, 8 weeks to grow up. And then after that, behavior probably starts to drive the longer-term ones.
Do your fosters, well, I guess you kind of just answered that question, but your fosters are actively participate in finding adopters?
No.
No, just the shelter?
Just the shelter.
Oh, okay, well, that.
And some of that you need, if you're setting up a program, some groups do that. That you're taking on the responsibility. We have a city shelter that's across the water from us that I was surprised to learn when you take on a foster, it's a one-way ticket. And you have to pay for all the supplies, all the food, all medications, and you have to find a home. You're not done fostering until you find a home.
Most of the foster-based rescues that I work with, that's the case as far as keeping the animal until it's adopted. The rescues provide most of the supplies unless the foster volunteers and says, I'll take care of it. I'll write it off my taxes.
Finally allowed.
The rescue has to be a 501c. So, the food and everything is a tax deduction for the foster, but medicine, vet care, that kind of thing. And most of the rescues have adoption events weekly so that the fosters can take their dog or cat.
Gives them an opportunity to come
Right,
back.
so it's a two-way street. It's not just, okay, here's your cat or dog, whatever. The rescues also provide contracts. They do screening for adopters, interest forms, that kind of thing. So that's it. I'll catch those.
I have one more here.
Okay.
I was curious on how you manage all of the medical and the medical treatments that are required of your 4,500 animals that are in foster care. How do you maintain that? Are all of the visits on property with your medical staff?
Yes.
Is your coordinator coordinating all of those appointments?
Yes.
And how many hours a day are you open for that?
In the old shelter, we just did it in the afternoon because we were taking in public appointments for spay neuter, all doing this in a room smaller than this little podium. So we took in public appointments in the morning, we sent them home in the evening, and then foster got this little sliver of time after surgery was done between about 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. We had just a couple hours. It was pretty tight and pretty restrictive. Right now we can go from early morning until late at night because we actually have the shelter set up in the clinic where there's 4 individual exam rooms that are set up just like you would in a private practice. We're going to come in through the lobby, 4 different individual exam spaces, and then hallways that lead off into the clinic. Yeah, so we go from early till late now.
Do you treat everything?
Yes.
As far as your dogs and cats that come in, I mean, you test for parvo, you treat the parvo, you treat everything before that animal is transferred either to a foster.
We'll take legs off, eyes out. We don't treat cancer. It's one thing there's groups that have tried and probably will. We will take just about any lump bump. We'll do internal surgeries. We have one vet that works on a part-time basis that does a lot of orthopedics for us. Comes in with her nitrogen tank and her toolbox and goes to town. But yeah, there's very little that we don't treat. We have Washington State University. They have their professor, and we do a 4th year teaching rotation with them. We have 3 vet students with the professor at any one time. So right now we have 75 students a year going through the program. That allows us to then leverage some of the teaching hospital, which is on the other side of our state, with cardiac consult, something that the ultrasound machine picks up. Our vets aren't quite sure what they're saying. We can send the electronic records back and forth.
So that's like an internship for vets?
For them, it's actually it's an elective course.
So how many veterinarians and support staff do we have devoted to the foster care appointments?
I don't think of the vet staff devoted to it. I think of it as, they're part of the bigger team. We have a medical director, one vet. We have 3.5 other full-time paid staff. We also have the professor and 3 more vet students at any one time.
There's only one vet?
No, we've got 4.5 vets of our own, plus the professor, plus 3 more students. Their only restrictions, they have to work with a vet, licensed vet, and it has to be one of our animals, not belong to the public. And we've got a support team of about 15 technicians and assistants that support them.
If you were asked to come aboard a shelter that had an intake of, say, 27,000 animals a year and a very new foster program, what would be the first thing you would do?
Well, I want to look at what kind of animals or what type of cases are going in and out. What's the practice right now? And then you've got to look at what's the real need. If you've got cats with URI that are just stacked up and they're getting sick and they can't even heal up because they're sick, they're reinfecting, they're still getting sick because they're stressed. I would pick one of the higher volume needs before you start going into the smaller cases of like bottle babies. I would pick something that everybody knows that it would help the shelter, but either someone hasn't figured out how to ask, who to ask, didn't think there was space, I didn't think there were resources. I would just look at what you're doing and what the real need is. Okay, you get the last question.
Okay. Is there a specific software that you use to track your fosters? Because obviously everybody has different criteria, right? Some like large, some like small, some only do puppies, that kind of thing. So when you have an animal that needs foster, do you have a database where you can just easily go in and just enter that criteria in and pops up Jane who does that?
It's not quite as easy to just get a Jane name, but we use PetPoint. And for a long time we used PetPoint for the location, and we kept PetPoint. And we actually kept a separate Excel database for the foster coordinators to use. And over time that thing just got so big, and if someone, heaven forbid, oops, I think I might have deleted the foster database spreadsheet. Making copies and keeping things in real time was a little more difficult. But right now we have everybody is loaded into PetPoint. And PetPoint has done enough changes over the years that it's robust enough that it can actually work for us.
Along with her question, I know you said hers was the last.
Okay.
Is PetPoint more for a large shelter organization or small?
No, we were actually the second shelter in the U.S. that turned on PetPoint. And that was back in 2006.
So it works for small?
It actually works better for small. We're big enough now, we've kind of outgrown PetPoint. Nobody wants to change PetPoint. And each shelter system, we've tried a couple, we used to be in a chameleon. They all have good and bad about them, and it's sort of jumping from one fire to another. It cost us about $100,000 to change software last time, and I can only imagine what it would cost. And that's just staff training, updates, retooling the modules that report to your accounting software. It's big. But PetPoint, especially for smaller shelters, they've got a couple different versions. It's free. You can actually get fairly cheap microchips, but they leverage it by they want you to offer insurance.
Does it have the ability to communicate with your website so it kind of posts live?
Yeah, they've got it's through an iframe, so you can actually just say, here's the code, and it will post your animals. It'll do 2 things. It'll do everybody's adoptable, and if you ask them to dig a little bit, they will also do the adopted before they come off. They'll stay for a couple of days. Because we all have stalkers on our website. They want to know. They may not be ready for adoption, but they all want to stalk us. And what happens? Okay, let me leave you with one thought that started rumbling through my head it was a couple months ago. And still kind of fresh and raw, and probably bring me to close to tears to even try to say it again. But I started this journey in animal welfare all about numbers. It was about numbers and percentages because there was so much work to do. And it was easy to forget sort of the individual pets that represented each of those members. And so as animal welfare has continued to grow and be nurtured, I'm thrilled with what's happening down here, the no-kill movement that you guys are working on. This will be open for debate for many years. I was either tricked, volunteered, or nominated, but I'm actually the chair of Washington's no-kill movement that we're working on with Best Friends. Ours is a little more homegrown because the save rates in Washington are actually very good. And I think we would probably become no-kill status just organically about 3 or 4 years from now. But we'd like to do it by 2020, and we will do it by 2020. But we also set another goal that instead of just the higher level of averaging all the shelters that are within the state, we set another goal 5 years out that every single shelter that's in the state will also be no-kill. And so that's where probably the velvet glove that you have to slip a rock in every now and then. We are probably going to have to start talking to some board members for nonprofits, some city and county council members for the taxpayer funded, because ultimately it's the me and the many of you, the directors and leadership of the agencies, are the problem with why the agency doesn't want to change. We've shown, you're showing, animal shelters can do more. You can do more in the exact same building. It doesn't have to be new. You can do more, which is asking for help, and you can do more by just having the will to do it and making it happen. And so as this change has started to really slowly overcome, I started to think less and less about the numbers and the percentages. I started to think more about what the pet sees. We still have, unfortunately, in our parts of the state, I'm sure Nevada and different parts of the country, there's geographic and economic euthanasia still happening. And the pet didn't have anything to say about that. They didn't choose the family or do a pro forma review and the W-2 scan of the family before they were adopted. They also didn't know that if they crossed the line in the street, that shelter X was going to pick them up, and they were going to have a very uncertain future, versus if they'd just gone left, you get a gold standard. And so my goal really today and moving forward is I want to make sure that thinking through those animals' eyes, that they don't have that worry, that they don't have to worry that the right or the left, or that am I going to have food tonight because the family had to make a decision about feeding the children or feeding Rex, and making sure that we have a community with the resources and the safety nets to solve these situations. And that's what I hope in animal welfare. No kill is fantastic. And let's make sure that every fluffy Rover Rex, this is our little boy Tucker, he came off the streets, and he's probably the reason I got into animal welfare. He was our first adoptee. That without a place like Seattle Humane, he would not survive. We saw the pictures in the before, and it was pretty gruesome. Now he's an old man, a little arthritic, not moving so well, about 18, 19 years old. But thinking on behalf of him and all the work you guys do, that together we're going to make this work. And it will go in spurts and fits, and people are going to ridicule us, and they're going to say we're crazy, and then they're going to get on board. So thank you for joining the journey. We're all going to